everything we hear, virtually everything we hear about drugs and alcohol, treatment, addiction, treatment, and recovery are myths. So I just wanted to knock off 5 myths, minute each, if I might.
Okay, let's do it.
In 2018, Mother Jones came out in support of Mormon alcohol policies. Mother Jones, of course, is a really progressive magazine, and yet they had a woman write that we should be like Utah and the Mormons. She grew up in Utah, and of course, you're not allowed to drink at all if you're a Mormon. And as she put it, she drank more then than she ever drank when she was legally able to drink. And she got breast cancer, and she blames it on that. And yet, in the most progressive magazine in the United States, she presented the Mormon view of alcohol. And a progressive magazine backed it 100%, that it shouldn't be used at all. And when she was growing up, the Mormon law was actually not to allow children to actually see alcohol. They would black off the bar so that children would not even see alcohol. It sounds like the medieval ages, doesn't it?
I was thinking the same thing, yeah.
And a progressive magazine authored that. I wrote about that whole thing for Filter Magazine. In 2011, I wrote about a Yale University addiction specialist who's there, their prevention program, who said that drinking caffeine and alcohol is fatal and you should never do it. From Yale, the professor, of course, Kahlua and other alcohol is made from coffee beans. And of course, Irish coffee combines alcohol and caffeine. So here's a man saying that popular liquors and drinks that people have been drinking for hundreds of years will kill you. Let me jump to somebody we know. Popular magazines have promoted naltrexone and Balcovin as cures for alcoholism. We know a woman, we admire her, who's written recently. She's written for The Atlantic. She's written for Filter. Radiolab, which is a prestigious science publication, has also presented the idea that naltrexone and Balcovin, this is their argument, would cure alcoholism, but they're somehow being suppressed by American medicine. I'll just quickly point out, no study has ever found naltrexone to be, in a controlled study, to be effective for treating alcoholism, none. And Charles O'Brien, who's Mr. Disease at the University of Pennsylvania, came to a conclusion why that was. He proposed that the specific chemical structure of naltrexone would only affect a certain genetic profile. So they took a group of alcoholics, alcoholism patients, they divided them in terms of their genetic profile. They did a double-blind study. You're going to have a PhD to understand this little segment, where neither the researchers nor the subjects knew whether they were getting placebo or naltrexone. And every one of the measures, quickness to drink again, amount drunk when you drank again, amount drunk on the highest amount, tendency to relapse, and overall recovery, not one single measure differed on either genetic group, called an allele, whether it was administered by naltrexone or placebo. And this is being presented, Radiolab is famous for presenting sophisticated scientific information.
And being parsimonious about it.
What's that?
And they're famous ostensibly for being parsimonious about it.
And for, pointing out fake science.
Right.
Well, I'll jump to my conclusion here. We all despise Donald Trump's anti-scientific attitude about climate change, about treating the pandemic. I make the modest argument that progressives are as bad as Republicans when it comes to considering drugs and alcohol and presenting anti-scientific information as though it were true. And let me jump to Kurt Anderson is a distinguished broadcaster, writer, fiction and nonfiction. He has a new bestseller out, Evil Geniuses. His previous book was called Fantasyland, How America Went Haywire, where he talks about irrationality, how Americans will believe any irrational thing. Kurt Anderson, as a columnist for New York Magazine, proposed that George Bush bombed Iraq because he quit drinking without going to AA. Quite a brilliant man.
Yeah.
He said, because George W. Bush quit drinking without AA, he was subject to denial, and that denial made him unaware of the consequences of bombing Iraq.
You've mentioned before you can't go wrong with that story, no matter how bizarre it is.
Right. A brilliant man proposed of course, every part of it is wrong. The idea that nobody quits drinking without AA, that if you do so, you endanger your psychiatric health, that AA is good for you psychiatrically, and then you'll do some horrible crime as a result of doing that. It's bizarre and extreme. I'll just do something contemporary now. There's a man running for Congress in New York. He's running for re-election. His main ad is to say how many people are dying of painkillers currently in New York City, and to blame that on drug companies. And his pitch for getting elected is saying, let's lock up drug company executives and throw away the key because they're causing the heroin, the opioid death pandemic. Opioid prescriptions have been going steadily downward since 2013. And every year, 2019, the first half of 2020, has seen new record levels of deaths due to opioids. And so let me draw through two conclusions. You can say anything bad about drugs and alcohol and get away with it. And that's part of our temperance tradition. We hate and talk to even upper class progressives like the editors of Mother Jones magazine secretly, and they drink better educated people drink more than poorly educated and less well-off people. Even recognizing their own behavior, they'll jump out in front of the train like Kurt Anderson and say something bad about alcohol and drugs, no matter what their own how their own behavior relies at A. And B, you can never go wrong endorsing recovery bromides, saying how great AA and the disease theory are, no matter how many. We're now experiencing 350% more deaths per annum due to drugs than we did in 1999. And that's backed by, and at the same time that we've cut opioid prescriptions, at the same time that now medically assisted treatment like naltrexone has spread nationwide. And everybody's on board with that, from the Drug Policy Alliance on through the National Institute on Drug Abuse. No amount of deaths, failures, obvious logical inconsistency, belying our own behavior can undercut our desire to follow the disease myths and the temperance myths of drugs and alcohol.